Welcome to another edition of Best Bet, everyone. I am your host, Frank Scatoni, and I am streaming live from the private dining room at Ranch 45, right across the track on Via della Valle. Fear not, I'm a man of the people. So once we wrap up today's seminar, I'll be hanging out in the restaurant for a bit before heading over to Del Mar to play in the LRF Cares Charity Challenge. And then after the races, I'll be at the Belly Up for the annual Permanently Disabled Jockey Fund Jockey Karaoke Fundraiser. It's my favorite event of the summer. If you can't be there, you should still go to pdjf.org and donate. It is for a good cause. Can't wait to introduce today's guest, but first I have to say what I say every week. So all of our first-time listeners out there know the deal. This is not a traditional selection show. We're not going to talk about every race. Just going to look at specific races and wagering strategies that offer the best opportunities to make a decent score. If you're watching live, feel free to leave us a comment or ask us any questions. The show will also be archived on Del Mar's Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube platforms. All right, now that the housekeeping's out of the way, we can get down to business. This moment really means a lot to me because today's guest knows a lot of the same people I know. We run in a lot of the same circles, but we've actually never had a chance to talk one-on-one, horse player to horse player. And yet I've watched him from afar as his career has exploded into the stratosphere. So I'm thrilled that we can finally connect today. First appeared on the TV show Horse Players. He was so good on that he landed at the Daily Racing Form, and he and our man Pete Fornatale blazed the trail and started the first real racing podcast. Now you can see him as a regular analyst on FanDuel TV, but more importantly, he's the handicapping authority on national television. I'm talking NBC. Doesn't get any better than that. Please welcome Matt Bernier. Matt, thanks for joining me, man.
Frank, thank you for having me. It's an honor. And like you say, it seems like an impossibility that we know as many common people as we do, and we've never sat down for any length of time to chop it up. Thankfully, we've got a nice card out at Del Mar here this afternoon that I think we can dive into, and hopefully it ends up with you winning the contest later on this afternoon.
Well,
on by Little Red Feather.
That's what I'm hoping. And we both have a horse we'll talk about in a little bit that could win me the contest. Before we get into all the nitty gritty about handicapping and wagering, because we've never spoken before, please tell me your horse racing origin story. Start from the beginning. Tell us everything.
I mean, you want to talk about lightning in a bottle, just kind of the right place at the right time. I was a college student in Western Massachusetts, and I was going back and forth between my school and my parents' home. And I went home one night, and I was just kind of flipping through the channels. I wanted to get some real food, not eat the dining hall food. And TVG popped up. We actually had the sports package primarily for European soccer and some other things, but TVG was part of it. And I didn't understand why, as I was watching these horses, I believe it was from the Meadowlands, it was harness racing, right? Why one horse was 3-1 and why one horse was 30-1. So I just kind of started doing a little bit of research on my own. And I played baseball my whole life. So when I sort of was introduced to past performances, they look a lot like the back of a baseball card with the statistics year over year. In this case, it's race by race for these horses. So that was kind of a bit of an easier transition or a sort of intro to things for me. And, you know, a little bit went a long way, sort of reading some books and kind of got the staples that everyone starts with, whether it be Byers' books or Steve Davidowitz's books or Jim Quinn or anyone else, you name it, Tom Brohammer. I felt like I needed a little bit of a foundation to sort of dip my toe into the deep end. Then once I started really playing, I had an aha moment one day. It was in the winter when they were still racing on the inner dirt, the inner track at Aqueduct. And it was only a 5-horse field. And I liked the longest shot on the board. And I said, I have to be wrong because nobody was picking the horse. And the horse was 10 or 12-1 in a 5-horse field. And it ended up winning. And that for me was kind of when the light bulb went on. That was sort of actually, you don't want to be part of the crowd. You'd rather be a little bit against the grain because that's when you can make some of your better scores. So that's how the whole thing started. The first handicapping contest I ever entered, I happened to win. It was put on by the DRF, and that got me out to Las Vegas to the NHC. And NHC led to horse players led to the racing form, to NBC, to FanDuel TVG. It's been a wild, and it's even scarier to think it's been 10 years already now.
Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. I know you're being modest. You say you kind of caught lightning in a bottle, but right place, right time. But you also had to back it up, right? You had to be able to put your money where your mouth is, so to speak. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because being a public handicapper and analyst, it's a very tough job. If you're right, everyone says, any moron could have picked that horse. If you're wrong, hey, you're a bum. I know that because I put myself out there, but I do this in a horse racing bubble, right? So most people understand just how tough the game is. You're on national TV, right? There are a lot of people out there who might be making their first bet ever on the Kentucky Derby. They have no idea what they're doing or who to bet. That's a lot of pressure. I mean, do you approach that situation any differently than you would, say, if you're, doing your analysis on FanDuel TV?
The only thing I do differently is just kind of the verbiage and the way that I'll explain why I like a certain horse, because we kind of get the directive when we're doing an NBC show. You have to be aware of your audience and who's watching. This is genuinely some folks that may have never watched a horse race before, and they turn it on, the first Saturday in May just because they want to watch the Kentucky Derby. So from that standpoint, it is far different than when I'm speaking to an audience with FanDuel TV, or if it's on a podcast within the Money Media or anything else, or an instance like this. The selections and the process to get to that point for me is no different. Whether the horse is 30-1 or 3-1, if I like for a reason and I think I'm getting fair odds, then it's fire away. And the difficult thing, and really this goes to whomever, whatever sort of outlet I'm on, is changing the mentality. I think, and you could speak to this as well in your position, the idea that I think there are still far too many people that are selection oriented as opposed to betting oriented. And I've tried to, over the past year or so, really get away from the idea of, or at least say, look, this is my pick. This may not necessarily be how much I'm betting or what I'm betting on, because I think this horse is going to win, but at 1-5, I wouldn't bet him with your money.
Right.
It's all relative to how likely they are to have success here today.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it actually leads me into my next question. But first, I just want to say, unfortunately for me, because I'm always at the track, I'm always doing stuff. I don't get to watch a lot of television coverage, whether it's the NBC or FanDuel TV, or even the simulcast feed. I'm busy doing my own thing. But this year I happened to be watching the Kentucky Derby at home, and I saw you, and I know you it's such success. You win tournaments because you have to pick long shots, and you talked about being a contrarian. But man, I was so blown away. I was like, man, he keeps coming up with the same wise guy horses I'm coming up with. And you remember, I DM'd you after the show that day, and I said, man, that was just so good. And I felt that you did such a good job, and you explained things so well. And to your point, you kind of want to go against the grain. You have to be clever. You have to look for value. So that's what I'm going to say. Your point, there's a big difference between selection handicapping and giving out picks and then making money, right? That's what the game's all about. You might have great picks, but you have to bet them properly. And that's what this show's all about. And I want to get to your general wagering strategy in just a little bit. But first, take us through the basics. What is your handicapping approach? What tools do you use? How do you tackle a card? What are you looking for when you're trying to select your spots?
Well, I guess let's start with the tools. I really lean into 3 sets of speed figures: the Beyer speed figures, Thorograph, and Timeform US. Timeform US and Beyer you can get combined with DRF's Formulator product, which I still think is the best pure handicapping tool that's available. But then I couple that with Thorograph with the speed figures that Jerry Brown and company make. And that's kind of my sort of little setup. I like to, I think 3 sets of figures is ideal. I understand that's asking a lot, especially for folks that may not have access to all of these sort of things, or can't afford to pay for all these things at one time. But the reason is I like to compare and contrast. If the 3 figs are all in line in lockstep, okay, I'm good with it. I think it's a pretty solid number. If there's an outlier, I want to know, is the outlier correct, or are the other 2 kind of more in line? And then that at least can give you a bit of an idea and maybe key you into some bigger prices that can kind of slip through the cracks if you're only using 1 set of figs. As far as the actual handicapping, nuts and bolts wise, pace makes the race. I know it's kind of an old cliche, but And I have some people that give me a hard time from time to time about picking so much speed, but it's inherently the United States in dirt racing.
Yes.
Speed wins. That I wish there was some other way to say it. And it's ironic because I picked the amount of speed that I do, but then again, my favorite stuff to bet on is turf routes. And I like that because it's a little bit more of a dance. That's the way I call it anyway. It's not necessarily just go as fast as you can for as far as you can. There's a lot more decision making. There's a lot more timing. Trips matter much more, I think, in turf racing. And then you do get that all-out sprint for home. It's one of my favorite things to explain to friends that come to the track or just complete, newbies that are checking it out at the very beginning. You watch a dirt race run at 1.25 miles versus a turf race run at 1.25 miles. They will genuinely be run the complete opposite. The dirt race is going to go the fastest early on and the slowest late, and the turf race, for I would say 99 out of 100 times, will go crawling slow early on, and they're going to sprint home. And it's just, I think to me, turf routes are the most, not to get cheesy, the most romantic form of horse racing that there is.
I agree with you, and then that's why they race that way, over in Europe, all around the world. I mean, it's all about turf racing, and I'm with you. Those are the most enjoyable races for me to handicap because I feel like there's a little bit more of an intellectual challenge. It's a little more strategy involved, and that's just what I enjoy. And I enjoy watching the turf races, the way that they unfold. Like you said, who's going to be able to quicken? Like, I don't know if you were able to see Anizette win yesterday in the yellow ribbon, but this was really interesting. I was recap the race for my Frankly Speaking column for In the Money Media. And when I was watching the race live, there was a moment where it looked like I expected him to tip out and just, get in the clear and make the run in the lane. But he didn't do that. He was kind of, and I go, don't tell me he's going to get her in trouble, because it looked like he was going to duck inside. Everything worked out fine, but reading the press box notes after the race, he said there was a reason he did that. And that was because the horse in front of him, Bella Bell, he knew that the horse had a tendency to lug out. And he didn't want to be outside if that horse was going to lug out. So he waited as long as he could. And then once he saw daylight where he wanted to be, he did that. So it's a chess match, right? Jockeys are supremely important in turf racing. And again, they're my favorite races to handicap. Let's go back to what you talked about, speed. I mean, anyone who's been following Del Mar and plays speed should be rich by now. The main track has been supremely biased towards speed. Every day I do the recap, I look at the charts, I see 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. I mean, it's just been incredible. And anyone out there who hasn't noticed it, notice it now, pay attention. Of course, now that I say it, it'll all be rally wide today, But I want to talk about wagering. We've got your handicapping approach. Just indulge me for a minute, because I think you'll appreciate this story, and I think our listeners will too. So 2 weeks ago, I finished this live stream. I went into the main dining room here at Ranch 45, having some lunch. I met a few guys who came down from Northern California. They play the races pretty seriously. One of them is a prominent owner and a really good handicapper. I was very flattered. He said he reads my stuff. He follows me. He knows how I like to handicap. I like to try and be clever, make cases for price horses. And then he even, he thanked me. He said, hey, man, you made me some money over the years. Thank you so much. And that felt really good. But then he asked me, he goes, Frank, come on, tell me the truth. Sometimes, do you ever just keep a horse for yourself, not give it out to the public? And he was being serious. And I said, you know what? First off, I'm flattered that you think I'm that good, that I have so many price horses that I could actually put one in my back pocket. I don't have that luxury. But then I told him the reality. And I believe this is true. You might think it's different. I said to the guys, look, let's say I love a horse. The horse is going to be a big price. I can walk around this room and give that same horse to everybody in the room, and each one of them is going to do something different with the horse. They're going to bet the race differently, and most of them are going to screw it up and lose, right? So I don't hold anything back, because handicapping and picking horses is just one part of the equation. You have to be able to make money on your picks. You need to maximize your opinions. So let's talk about that. We'll get more strategic when we talk about the specific races. But what is your general wagering approach? Are there specific wagers you gravitate toward, or you just kind of see how the card shakes out? What do you do?
So I think you have to play what the card gives you. You can't just automatically force something. You can't go into the day and say, maybe with the exception of a big carryover and a pick six or something like that, but you can't go in and say, oh, you know what, this is the day that we're going to smash the pick five, and then you take a look and you think it's very, very formful, and you go, okay, well, I was going to sink $250 into this, when in reality, I think it's only going to return $100. Well, maybe we wait for the late pick five, or we wait for tomorrow's pick five, something like that. For me, I, for the longest time, was a win and double player. And I feel like with the way things have changed over the years, with some odds shifts here and there, and even with the doubles, the beauty of the double, for those that are new, but again, this is a little bit more of an advanced audience, the idea that you can see, or you get an idea of what your return will be when you hook up leg one into leg two with the probable. I feel like you even have started to lose a hair bit of value with that wager. So I've gone, and you have to pick and choose your spots. You have to have meets that are ongoing where the pools are large enough and there's enough liquidity in there to really do this. But I think the pick three is kind of the forgotten bet. It kind of, I don't want to say it fell out of favor, but it was one of those that once the pick fours and fives, and obviously the pick six were along, the pick three sort of was kind of pushed off to the side. When to me, if you can get into a pick three that wraps up with a horse that should be a price, foreshadowing, you and I in the Nightcap,
right?
The idea is, rather than play it for your base bet, your dollar, your 50 cent, or whatever it may be, I want to tier it into this horse. Let's say it's 20 to 1 on the line. If I can be alive to a $20 pick three or a $50 pick three, and turn that 20 to 1 shot into effectively something that'll return $10,000, that's my approach at this point. I think over the past year and a half, 2 years, I really started doing it at Gulfstream last year, not this past championship meet, but last year in 2023. And it really paid dividends when I got to Keeneland, because 2 of my 3 giant scores last spring at Keeneland were in pick threes. And I think a lot of people would hear that and not even consider the pick three as a sort of option to make a score. You can really make a score in just about anything in horse racing. You just need to bet it appropriately.
Right. Now, you make a great point. When I first started playing the game, I played the pick three all the time. And now I actually can't remember the last time I played it. I gravitated to other things. But I have to start playing it now, because I'm gonna play it today. I'm gonna mirror your strategy here. But to your point, the markets have become so efficient these days where it's very difficult to find good value in overlays. So the win pool, the double pool, I like those. I stick to those, but it's tough to find value there. So if you can extract that and get one more race in there in the pick three, I don't think the computer players are really attacking those pools, right? So I think you will find more value and overlays in a pool where the CAW guys aren't.
And I think it's not even so much the idea that the value has evaporated in the win in the double pool. It's just, boy, your margins are so slim.
Yeah,
that,
it's
man,
harder.
It's so much more difficult to stay ahead. And I think, to me, those have become pools that are there for churn, where, you know what, you need it to maintain the bankroll. Because let's be honest, when you play some of the bigger picks, the minute you add a leg, it gets exponentially more difficult. You can go on prolonged losing streaks there, and that can eat away at your bankroll in a hurry.
Yeah.
To me, the win in the double pool now functions a little bit more as, okay, you know what, if we can pick up a couple $100 here, that then supplements things down the road to that pick five on, Friday night that I'm really, I handicapped on Tuesday, and that looks like a sequence that I really want to sink some money into. Hopefully a win bet on Saturday or a double that I connected with on Sunday is basically what I'm going to be playing with once we get to Friday night.
Yeah, that's a great point. Bankroll preservation, trying to build that bankroll up so you can reinvest it when you have a better opportunity down the road. We have to get to the races, but I want to just ask you real quickly, because we do have the LRF Cares Charity Challenge today, and you've had some success in the tournament world. Any advice or strategies you'd like to share with maybe someone who might be playing a live bankroll tournament for the first time?
My biggest advice, if you are brand new to this thing, is do not try to play the entire card. It's going to eat away at your overall bankroll. If you can find a spot or two on this card. So you got 10 races effectively to play from. Find 1 to 2 spots and just push. And if you're right, you're going to get rewarded. And I think the unique thing about the live money contests is they are really mirroring what we should be, air quotes, should be doing. I hate the whole EV sort of police where they come through and they say, that's a bad bet. You did it incorrectly.
Right.
It's your money. Bet however you want and do whatever you want with it. Yeah. If you want to go by letter of the law and absolutely maximizing potential, yes, you should be doing it very, very on the sort of, the narrowest and thinnest of lines. But that would be my only advice. If you're new to this, pick a couple of spots. Don't try to play every race.
I agree with you. In order to win these tournaments, you try to get to your number in the least moves possible, and you try to do it in the pools where you think you have an advantage and you have a high win strike percentage. So that's great advice for anyone who's playing out there. All right. Well, we have a couple of races we want to talk about, 3 to be in fact. So let's kick it off with race 3. It's the featured race on the card. It's the $150,000 Best Pal. It's a grade 3 for 2-year-olds going 6 furlongs on the main track. I'm glad you picked this race because it's a short field. This is normally a race that I would probably just put my fan hat on and skip. Baffert has a 3 to 5 shot in here. Number 5 Getaway Car. Wesley Ward has an interesting horse, a 2-year-old filly. Skipped the Sorrento Stakes yesterday against fillies to run today against the boys. So talk to us about this race and tell us how we're going to make a little money.
Yeah, to be honest with you, Frank, this was also a race that initially I said, well, it's only a 5-horse field, and there's a Baffert horse that'll be odds on, going to be kind of difficult to make a buck. But then again, even with the defection of the 1 in here, to me, if you played something like a cold punch 3-5 exacted in here, White Sands is the 3, the 5 is Getaway Car, the Baffert runner, there's an opportunity anyway to maybe make $4 on an exacta or $3 on an exacta for every dollar that you bet. And I understand maybe you're saying, well, you need 2 things to happen. You need to have the winner and you have to have the runner up. I'd be stunned if Baffert didn't run 1st or 2nd in this spot. And that's not a knock against Tiz Happy and his connections or Mischief River, the 4. It's just, it's Bob Baffert in a graded stakes race with a horse that has speed on a track that we just touched on, has been very kind to speed. He's probably in your exacta there. But to me, White Sands, I mean, tell me if you remember a more bizarrely campaigned horse that's supposed to be good. The pedigree is there. She's a half to Jackie's Warrior. The ownership group is there. I mean, you've got some Coolmore folks here. It's Wesley Ward. She debuted at Belterra, won by 100. And then they run against the boys at Prairie Meadows. She wins by 200. And now they go to Del Mar and they don't run in the girls' race. They run in the boys' race. I've never seen a horse campaigned like this. I have to take it that it's a positive that she's here. And again, maybe this is not going to be the race that makes you rich. But if you want to play it, I think a cold punch 3-5 exacta is the way to go.
Well, yeah, I mean, this goes back to the tournament strategy we talked about, right? So the starting bankroll is 300. If you do 300 in this race, push all in, and you get 4 to 1. Now your bankroll's 1,500, and now you have some real money to play with, right? And it's a very high strike rate because you have the 2 horses who are likely to run 1st and 2nd, and you're putting the horse who's going to be more value on top. So, what you said earlier, you have to take what the card gives you. And like with the pick 3, you have to bet aggressively in certain spots, and you have to, not be afraid to spend a little money to try to make money. So that's a very simple play, but I like it. Let's move on to race 6, a $50,000 maiden claimer contested at 1 mile on the turf. The rails are at 12 feet. The morning line favorite is number 6 On the Mark at a low 6 to 5. This Glatt trainee has been facing tougher animals. And if you go all the way back to August 2022, that's a long time ago, you'll see that this horse lost a heartbreaker the only time he tried this level. Like I said, that was a long time ago. This horse keeps knocking on the door at the maiden special weight level. Does he finally break through while dropping today, or is this the kind of horse you just want to beat?
Well, so more often than not, I want to try to beat a horse like this, where he has tried the level in the past. Granted, he only lost by a half length, but he's failed at it before, and he's lost 8 other times. And full disclosure, this is not the strongest of opinions. You can see with only a $25 win bet. And again, I'm a big believer of, win and whatever that denomination is, it's a placeholder. If you are a $2 bettor, it's a $2 bet. If you're a $2,000 bettor, do whatever you feel comfortable with.
Right.
For me, I'm usually a $100 win bettor. So on the small side, this would be 25 or 50. I thought the 9 Storm Off offered enough intrigue in a race where you've got a number of class droppers, and the class droppers in California, this is anecdotal. You could speak to this better than I could, Frank. The idea that I do think maiden special to maiden claiming in California, I think is more substantial than maybe what we see in some other jurisdictions. And I say that because I think in other jurisdictions, it's more of a red flag. To me in California, I actually think it's the horses probably spotted now where they belong. They were taking on tougher company. They couldn't quite hack it. I was in Florida all winter long, and my immediate reaction when we see horses go from maiden special to maiden claiming is that they're trying to cut bait. It's not that they're trying to find the right group. It's that, maybe we're getting ready to move to Kentucky. We're moving to Keeneland, and some of the big barns, we got to make room. Or guess what? You're not coming with us on the van. So we're just trying to cut bait and move on. So I had the hardest time sort of juggling that whole equation. But in California, I feel like these class droppers, they usually run pretty true to when they drop to 50, they're probably running against the group they need to run against now.
Yeah, it is a significant thing here. And to your point, on different circuits, they have other options. So someone could claim that horse and maybe move it to a cheaper circuit or whatever. Here, we're on an island, right? These horses are going to be recycled, right? So you drop the horse because he's not good enough to win a maiden special weight. You get the win, maybe you get claimed, and then, you move on. So these horses who do drop are competitive. But the tricky thing is, like, maiden 20s are, in my opinion, are usually pretty easy to handicap because half the field just isn't any good. They might never win a race. When you get up to the higher claiming levels, I have a little bit of a trickier time because you have to assess, is the horse in this race really worth 50? Yep. They're dropping the horse for a reason. Maybe the horse might be worth 20, but they're going to try the horse at 50. We see 62.5 claiming levels here for the maidens, and that's tricky for me because, I started off with the fundamentals of handicapping, and class is very important to me. It's not as important now as it was back in the day. Back in the day, there was a huge difference between a $20,000 claimer and a $40,000 claimer. That was a huge gap. Today, that gap's not so much. It's more of an even playing field. So it becomes a little tricky. A guy like Peter Miller who trains your number 9 Storm Off, he is going to put the horse where he thinks he can win. Doesn't matter if he loses the horse. He wants to win races. He wants to get his owners in the winner's circle. So I have no, that would not be a concern for me. And look, they only paid $50,000 for this horse, so they're running for 40 to get a little bit of a weight break at the 50 level. But that's what they think this horse is worth. So that's where they're going to run him.
The other thing for me with this horse, and again, it's not the strongest opinion, but the rationale behind going this direction, especially at something close to this price, around 8-1, would be the debut at Santa Anita visually wasn't great, didn't get out of the gate well at all, and then just kind of was steady as a steady does. It's just steady that the 3/8. I mean, eye of the beholder. I didn't think it was really anything substantial. The horse to me wasn't really running much. But more importantly, the race has been pretty solid. The figures have checked out, and you've had 3 next out winners come out of that race. I don't care about the run at Los Al on dirt. Just point blank, draw a line through it. And when you take a look at the pedigree, the dam won in her 3rd lifetime start. So I think one of the more overlooked aspects of handicapping pedigree is, when does the dam side win? Do they win first out? Do they win second out? Or do they need a few starts before you see that family typically go on and do anything? Now, this is the only horse to run out of this mare. But again, she won in her 3rd lifetime start. The second dam didn't win until start number 6. And Get Stormy as a stallion, I'll tell you what, that's got to be the lowest number for first out win rate for any stallion that's a name. He's 3%. He's 11 for 321 with firsters. So the fact that this horse was even 13-1 and Juan Hernandez rode on debut is probably stunning. Should have been 100-1. So I think getting out to a route of ground, which Get Stormy as a stallion does very well with. He himself was a turf router, and He gets 15% with those types. I think with the starts under his belt, maybe storm off. Maybe today is the day. It's not a strong push, but I think at a number in a race that I don't really love anyone else, this is where I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take a shot on an 0 for 9 maiden, right? Who's going to be the overwhelming favorite in this race. And to your point, that debut race, that was a 6 furlong sprint. And if you look at the internal fractions, that horse ran the last quarter mile pretty quickly and made up a lot of ground on a Santa Anita turf course that typically doesn't allow that, especially in the turf sprints. So I think that's a great play. You're getting a good price on it, and you're going against the vulnerable favorite. So Matt likes race 6, 25 to win on number 9, Storm Off. Let's move on to the Nightcap. Maiden special weight contested at 9 furlongs on the turf with the rails at 12 feet. I almost fell off my chair when you picked this race, and then you texted me who you liked. I thought I was I was going to be the only one. I made this race my spot play for, frankly speaking, in the money media. Everybody can read my thoughts about my opinion of the race there, but the morning line favorite, number 3, Middleburg, 5-2. He was favored last time, going shorter, finished 3rd. He had things his own way the whole race. He's lost lengths in the lane in each of his 2 turf races, despite perfect setups. Now he has to run an extra furlong. I mean, don't get me wrong, he'll run his race, and I'll likely use him in my exotics underneath. But I thought this race was just, ripe for a big price. And I like 2 horses in here. You like one of them, and that horse is 20 to 1. Tell us how we're getting paid in this race, Matt.
So the play that we'll give out here is 100 to win on the 6, Anglican, who is 20 to 1, goes out for trainer Vicky Oliver. Vicky Oliver is based in Kentucky. This is a horse that most recently was running at Horseshoe Indianapolis, and now suddenly is showing up out west at Del Mar. The thing about this horse, Frank, and I'm sure it's the same reasons that you're intrigued. I don't care about the debut. Went to the sidelines for a month or 2. Comes back at Horseshoe Indy against maiden special weight runners, and didn't show a ton of interest early on, but I don't really hold that against a turf runner if they're going to kick on at the end. Down the backside at about the 3/4, finally got out into the clear and just never got any closer to the rail from then on. This horse was about 4 or 5 wide every step of the way. And I mentioned earlier when we talked about tools that you use to handicap, for me, Timeform US and their pace figures are absolutely paramount. That, I have to have an idea of just how fast the race was run at certain points. And they'll go as far as to color code things red or blue if it's a really hot pace or a really soft pace. This was a race that there was no pace signed on whatsoever. Right. Anglican is parked wide, makes an early move just inside the half-mile pole, trying to get into contention. I didn't think Fernando de la Cruz did anything wrong. He was giving his horse a chance to win, and not only continued on at the end, I wouldn't have held it against him if he just kind of went up and down at the end. He found at the very end, and he nearly got the job done. He only lost by about a half length. It's officially a neck, but the point is that race to me was far better than the running line looks. So I was working. I had a shift on July the 11th. I'm licking my chops. He's coming back. He's going to be running on turf. I'm putting together Horseshoe Indy's turf pick 3, and they get washed off. Unfortunately, they got one of those crazy rainstorms. Yeah. He didn't run terribly on the off-going, but that's not what he wants. Now they ship him to Del Mar to run in a spot like this. Look, you and I both think he's probably a fraction of this 20 to 1. Maybe he's closer to 8 or 10.
Yeah, I think you're right.
I'll bet him to win, but this is case in point of that pick 3 idea. The race prior, I think Bags Gold is the likeliest winner in there, the 8. So I'm going to tier things. It'll basically be AA in the last 2 legs. And in race number 8, there's going to be a number of horses that I use to kind of kick things off. But the idea is going to be to hopefully get alive in a big pick 3 to the 6 Anglican. And worst case scenario, if I screw it up before we even get to this race, we'll come back and bet 100 to win.
Right. Okay. I agree with everything you said about that horse. And here's a little extra push. Vicky Oliver is an excellent trainer who Pete and I would say is a certified member of the bomb squad. She wins at big prices, and every summer she will ship 1 or 2 horses out here to Del Mar, and they always fire, and they're often overlooked. And this is a question I want to ask you. You know, I'm so locked into the Southern California circuit. So, you know, I know when a trainer ships in for certain purposes or whatnot, but you have to do races all over the country, right? So I like to focus on one thing because I want to know everything about a circuit. You do all the work, but you're doing, you know, different tracks, different trainers, different horses. That's an asset and an advantage, but at the same time, it's also very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, and look, no one would ever cry for anyone in a position like this. We're extremely fortunate, but it does make it far more difficult, I think, from a gambling standpoint, to really truly be locked in to every track all the time. When we're doing a shift and we're covering 5 tracks, I'm primarily locked into 2 of them. And the other 3, I will kind of roll on the fly and hopefully, you know, just the knowledge that you've accumulated, you can hopefully impart something out there to somebody listening that they can then take advantage of. But for me, you know, Florida was where I was based for 4 months over the winter. And then I spent most of April, June, beginning of July in Kentucky. And I'll go right back to Kentucky for September and October. So I would say those are the 2 that I focus on the most these days. So Vicky Oliver at the end of the Churchill meet in the summer was very, very cold, very chilly. Yeah. And things have gotten a little bit better here, whether it be Horseshoe Indy or Ellis. But I still can't help but think if they're putting this horse on a plane, they're coming out for a reason. They're not coming out just because they want to go to Del Mar for a Sunday.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. She every summer she does that. And I also think this horse is really going to appreciate the added distance today. So that is our wise guy pick in race 6. Not going to be 20-1, but will still be a very good price. I just want to quickly mention another horse who I think is also going to be running on late. And, you know, if I have my bankroll heading into this last race and these 2 horses run, I should win the contest because number 1, Divisible Buy, is 6-1 on the morning line. Again, I don't think the horse will be as high as that, but Hall of Famer Neil Drysdale trains this horse. Typically with old school trainers, you know, they race their horses into shape, and the 3rd career start is the money run. Well, last time this horse almost got it done in the 2nd start and really lost a heartbreaker, and the horse galloped out really nicely. So those are my 2 key plays in the last race. And like I said, if I have the bankroll going into this and these horses fire, I should win. And if I don't win, I should probably hand back my my handicapping and tournament license.
I like Divisible Buy. I mean, I had mentioned to you before we came on that I had gotten bounced earlier. That was the day of a big pick 6 carryover. And this is one of the horses that I had in the payoff leg. And my heart about sank when I saw him running down the lane. He flattened out and couldn't quite get the job done at the end. But I think he's super live here this afternoon. And even if the 6 doesn't get it done, you can still make some money if you just kind of correctly put those bets together and the 1 pips you. So I think you're on a couple of live ones there, at least hopefully for our sake, Yard.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Matt. That wraps up this week's edition of Best Bet live from Ranch 45. I hope to see you when you come out to Del Mar later in the meet. We could actually shake hands and talk face-to-face instead of virtually. So I really appreciate what you've done today. I'll be back again next week with my guest, one of the best young guns out there, Tyler Hoffman. But until then, as I always like to say, good luck to us, and let's make some money.